Arthur Reed is the star of one of the most beloved kids shows of all time, Arthur. And as you may have noticed, he's an aardvark who wears glasses. But if you look at his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Reed, they don't wear glasses. How do we explain why Arthur is nearsighted? And what can genetics tell us about this? A pedigree is a visual map of a person's lineage that can be used to observe patterns in how genetic traits are transmitted through generations. Let's explore what different connections and symbols mean. The pointed arrow shows us the proband, or the individual who's prompting us to make the pedigree. Males are represented by squares, and females are represented by circles. If an individual has unknown sex, then they're represented by a diamond. A phenotype is a displayed trait. Individuals with the phenotype we're looking for are shaded, while individuals without that phenotype are unshaded. If we do not know an individual's phenotype, then we draw in a question mark. Deceased individuals are marked through with a line. Identical twins are shown by stemming from a single line and have a bar connecting them. Fraternal twins stem from the same point and do not have a bar joining them. As for how individuals are connected, mating individuals are directly connected with a straight horizontal line called a marriage bar. Related mating partners, or consanguineous partners, are connected by a double line. Children are vertically connected to the marriage bar of their parents. Siblings are connected through horizontal lines that stem from below the marriage bar. If a child is adopted into the family, then we place brackets around them. Lastly, where individuals are positioned on the pedigree tells us about their age and generation. Each row represents those in the same generation. The oldest generation is on the top, while the youngest generation is on the bottom. Generations are labeled with Roman numerals. Siblings are ordered from left to right according to their birth order. They're also numbered. Having this specific way of organizing family members on a pedigree allows us to consistently refer to individuals by generation and birth order. For example, Arthur in our pedigree is referred to as Roman numeral 4-5. So, now that we have Arthur's pedigree drawn out, let's talk about the inheritance pattern. Let's assume that we know that nearsightedness is an autosomal trait. This means that the trait is determined by genes on autosomes, which are non-sex chromosomes. In inheritance patterns, traits can either be dominant or recessive. Recall that parents each contribute an allele, or a form of a gene, for a trait such that their children receive one allele from each parent. The combination of alleles somebody has for a trait is called a genotype. If an allele is dominant, then this means that only one of those alleles is needed to be present to result in an associated phenotype. On the other hand, if a trait is recessive, then this means an individual needs two of the same alleles for a particular trait for it to result in the phenotype. By the way, homozygous is another way to say that there's two of the same alleles, like big A, and little a, little a. Heterozygous is another way to say that there are two different types of alleles, like big A and little a. So let's see if we can distinguish whether or not nearsightedness in aardvarks is an autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive trait, and also if we can assign genotypes to each of the family members. There are certain phenotype patterns that we can use to predict inheritance. A good place to start is to find parents who have the same phenotype, but children who do not share that phenotype. If you see two parents who have a trait, but they have a child who does not have that trait, then you know that that trait is dominant. This is because if the child doesn't have the trait, then the alleles for that trait must be masked by the dominant allele. This is what we see when both parents are heterozygous, where they show the dominant phenotype, but it's possible for them to have a child with a homozygous recessive genotype and a recessive phenotype. In the same vein, you can identify if a trait is recessive if you see a shaded child to unshaded parents. The parents must have been carriers of the recessive allele, but it was marked by a dominant one. So, is nearsightedness autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive in aardvarks? Arthur's mother and father are not nearsighted, but Arthur is. For the reasons we explained before, we know that nearsightedness is autosomal recessive. Let's go through and assign genotypes. We can automatically assign a homozygous recessive genotype for every family member with glasses. This includes Grandma Thora, Bonnie, and Sean, Richard, Fred, and Arthur. Everyone else has at least one copy of the dominant allele. Because Grandma Thora has glasses, we know that both of her parents were carriers of the recessive allele. This is the same for Arthur's parents. Because Grandma Thora and her partner had children both with and without nearsightedness, then we know that her partner had a heterozygous genotype. For Bonnie and Sean's adopted child, we don't know his biological parents' genotype or phenotypes. However, we do know that he has at least one dominant allele since George is not nearsighted. His genotype must be homozygous dominant or heterozygous, so we will mark his genotype as A_. The same goes for Lucy and Loretta's partners. Loretta must be heterozygous since she wears glasses and her parents are heterozygous and homozygous recessive. Loretta and Bud's children are marked with A_ since their parents' alleles can combine to be either homozygous dominant or heterozygous. Arthur's maternal grandparents are a little bit harder to figure out. We know that Grandpa Dave is heterozygous because he doesn't wear glasses, but he has a child who does. This means that he had to contribute a recessive allele. We don't know if Grandpa Dave's wife wore glasses or not, but we do know that she must have also contributed a recessive allele. It's possible for her to be heterozygous or homozygous recessive, since either way, those genotypes could result in kids with or without glasses so long as she had them with Grandpa Dave. So we will mark her as _a. Because we cannot be sure of Grandpa Dave's wife's genotype, we also can't be sure if Lucy and Jessica are homozygous dominant or heterozygous. But if their mother was homozygous recessive, then they would have to be heterozygous. But if their mother was heterozygous, then Lucy and Jessica could have also been homozygous dominant. So this means that we will mark them with a capital A underscore. For Cora, we know that she must be heterozygous whether or not her mother is homozygous recessive or heterozygous. She does not wear glasses, so we know that she has at least one dominant allele, and because her father wears glasses, we know that he had to contribute a recessive allele. Finally, we arrive to DW and Kate. They are daughters of two heterozygous parents, so assuming that they'll have normal vision, they could be homozygous dominant or heterozygous. So maybe we can mark them as capital A underscore. However, there's a possibility that DW and Kate might need glasses in the future. I guess we'll have to see.
DW!